Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and we're continuing with what you could call part two of our look at Russian warfighting capability, meaning the ability of the Russians to continue to manufacture weapons equipment and expand its ever-growing arsenal to continue to fight the Ukrainians. Now, first, I think it's important to look at history. I think it's important to look at what the mainstream media is saying now in retrospect to what the mainstream media has said in the past in regards to war within the historical context. So, if we go back all the way to World War II, and I think this is very, very important to look at, and I want to go back to the 22nd of June, 1941. And going from 1941, June 22, to roughly the middle part of July, towards the end of July, the Allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, Britain, firmly believed during this period of time that the Russians were going to be defeated by the Germans, especially with what happened during this time span, the period of June 22 to the middle of July 41. There was a battle. There was an encirclement. And this took place near what is known as now in Belarus, near the capital of what is now Belarus, Minsk. And we had a great encirclement of the Soviet forces by the German army that caused devastating losses. And this is just one in a number of encirclement campaigns by the German army that almost defeated the Soviet Union. And in this battle, and again, we have to look at history. We have to look at what's happening now and what is being said now. But after this battle, in which more than 420,000 Soviets were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner, with an additional nearly 5,000 tanks destroyed, 9,000 guns and artillery pieces, and just under 2,000 aircraft destroyed by the German army in this Minsk encirclement. A massive chunk of the Soviet army was utterly obliterated. And right after this happened, again, many quote-unquote analysts, many generals, top-ranking generals here in the United States and allied nations, adamantly believed that the Soviet Union was getting ready to collapse. Now, that didn't happen. We all know what followed in the years to come. Fast forward to the Syrian Civil War. I don't know if you guys can recall what was being said during the Obama administration about the Assad regime, about the fact that it was absolutely going to collapse. It was just a matter of time. Assad is still in power. Assad is not going anywhere. The mainstream view was incorrect. In 1941, after that devastating defeat by the hands of the German Wehrmacht, something else happened. The Germans did not win. The Russians, aka the Soviets, were the leading factor in the demise of Nazi Germany. Fact. Now, as we look at what's happening now in Ukraine, obviously there is a narrative, especially in the Western press. And that narrative right now seems to be portraying that the Russians are going to lose this conflict. Now, it's possible. The Russians could lose this conflict. But point being, the mainstream media and what people believe right now has and can change. And that kind of is a good segue into what we're looking at now, and that's the Russian capability to conduct war. And yesterday, we had a look at the Russian, the largest tank production facility on the planet. And we understand right now that facility is churning out main battle tanks to be used in the ongoing conflict, and possibly an expanded conflict in the weeks and months and years to come. But today we're going to look at a city 1,000 miles to the east of Moscow, more than 1,200 miles from the Ukrainian border. And we're going to look at the BMP. It's an armored infantry fighting vehicle manufacturing facility. Again, just a massive facility. If we look here, this is where the BMP-1, the BMP-2, the BMP-3, the BMD-4 are produced. And we're now seeing the Russians refurbish quite a few numbers of BMP-1s. They're taking the older BMP-1s, they're popping the top, they're putting a 30-millimeter turret on the top of that system, updating the anti-tank guided weapon system on it, and the same with the BMP-2 as well. And we'll probably see an uptick in the production of the BMP-3. I believe that it's probably very, very much prudent for the Russians to start production of the newest generation, such as the Krugenets 25, very capable system, much better crew protection, much more comfortable for the crew to exist. I don't know if anyone's ever had the opportunity to get inside of, say, a BMP-2. I have. Not a comfortable environment. The Bradley is just, I feel, a much better vehicle, obviously, both in terms of technology, capability, and comfort for the crew as well. But again, the Russians, and before that the Soviets, were more about effectiveness and the production of just massive amounts of equipment. Quality is fine, but quantity has a quality all its own. Right? Maybe? But anyway, again, this massive facility very much on par with what we looked at yesterday. And in all probability, we'll start churning out massive numbers of more tanks, more fighting vehicles, maybe things we haven't seen yet on the battlefield that the Russians are going to produce. And this is part of that Russian war machine. This is what, if this thing, again, the Russian war machine, really gets going and starts cranking out hundreds of tanks, hundreds of armored fighting vehicles, starts expanding its ground forces. I know there's a lot of talk about supposedly bleeding the Russians in Ukraine. And some people think that you could see the collapse of the Russian Federation within a year. You could see the destruction of the Russian military continue. But I believe 1 year from now, 2 years from now, that's not going to be the case. Probably in about 3 years, we're going to look back on this, and things are going to change quite a bit, especially in terms of Russian capability. War has the ability to create and make change. And I think we are going to see that inside of the Russian armed forces, both in the deployment of its equipment, its doctrine, and its size. Again, the Russian army prior to this war with Ukraine was not a very big ground forces. Again, 290 to 300,000 personnel. 2 years from now, it is going to be much, much bigger. And it's all going to start here at these massive factories 1,000 miles east of Moscow, which has its roots when the Russians moved its great industry base east of the Ural Mountains, which ultimately culminated in the defeat of Nazi Germany. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Only history will decide. So again, what will things look like 2 years from now? I have a hunch that things are going to look very, very much different than what people think they are going to look like. So we'll see. We'll continue to monitor, report, and bring you more content for your consumption. Thank you for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.